Since its invention, the TV has been just that, a TV. But what if it could be something more? Meet Samsung Vision AI. Whether it's upscaling classic content to look brand new or translating an English broadcast subtitles to Spanish in real time, Samsung Vision AI helps you get more from TV than you ever thought possible. Redefine what it means to watch TV with Samsung Vision AI. Visit Samsung.com to learn more. Vision AI features vary by model. Upscaling utilizes AI-based formulas, and results may vary based on source content. Translation accuracy not guaranteed.
Saks Off Fifth. Up to 70% off every day. Spring is in full swing here at Saks Off Fifth, with so many exciting trends to try. From matching sets and floral dresses to wide-leg jeans and chic accessories, find all of the season's must-have styles. Plus, shop new designer arrivals weekly. Find Gucci, Valentino Garavani, Versace, Stuart Weitzman, and more. Head to SaksOffFifth.com or a Saks Off Fifth store near you for up to 70% off every day.
For the duration of Garner's trial, there was a critical piece of information that the Pam Cahanes jury knew nothing about. Something they were not permitted to hear about at all. Something that would have been very, very prejudicial against Thomas Garner. Let's talk about Kathy Hicks. On September 19, 1982, at about 10:15 a.m., Honolulu, Hawaii police officers Glenn Cancino and Michael Kawamoto responded to the area of 4151 Nu'uanu Drive. They had received a 911 call from a Robert Midkiff about, quote, a body of a female lying in a gulch. When they arrived, Midkiff told the officers that 2 joggers had actually asked him to call in the report, and then they'd left. Midkiff directed the officers to a grassy area on the west side of Nu'uanu Drive. There, 30 feet from the roadway down an embankment, lay the body of a woman. Officer Cancino's notes described the body as being a black female, lying on her back with her head facing south and her feet pointing north. Her left arm was draped over her neck, and her right arm was twisted under her back. Both eyes were swollen almost shut. There was blood on her lower lip, and she had scratches on the right side of her neck. She was wearing a reddish-purple midriff top and light brown pants. She had on 2 gold necklaces and a pair of earrings, and she was barefoot. Officer Kawamoto scanned the area and quickly located the joggers who had originally found the body. Their names were Weston W. and Evelyn H. They told him they were jogging along Nu'uanu Drive, and around 10 a.m. they stopped to walk down to the reservoir. There they came upon the body of the woman lying down the embankment. Weston said he touched the body just to check for a pulse, and when he found out there wasn't one, they walked across the street and asked Robert Midkiff to call the police. Weston stated that other than feeling the woman's wrist, he didn't touch or move her body in any way. Officers Dennis Baumgartner and Artie Mayoho arrived and secured the perimeter. Lieutenant Gordon Young and Sergeant Edward Kelly also came to the scene. They held the scene while detectives had time to respond. Joseph Ledbetter was the original detective, but he turned the case over to detectives Gerald Lee and Jumon Yu at 11:30 a.m. Honolulu City and County physician Norman Myers arrived and pronounced the woman dead at 12:37 p.m. At 12:50, the body was placed in a body bag and transported by island-wide mortuary employees to the City and County of Honolulu morgue. This was all supervised by Department of the Medical Examiner investigator Larry Rutkowski. Detective Hughes scanned the area and drew some conclusions about what had likely happened. At the edge of the roadway, there was an undisturbed area of grass extending 5 to 6 feet down the embankment. After that, grass and weeds were disturbed down to where the body lay. Detective Yu concluded that the woman's body was likely thrown from the side of the roadway and rolled down the slope to its final resting place. He surmised that she was dead before she was thrown down the embankment. Honolulu PD evidence specialists Leighton Kalapa and Nancy Parker processed the scene. They took photographs, diagrammed the scene, and scanned the area for evidence. Parker recovered an empty Burger King cup and an exposed roll of Kodak brand color film from an area near the body. But later, it was determined that neither of these had anything to do with the crime. Dr. Charles Odom, the chief medical examiner, performed the autopsy on the deceased woman on September 20th. Evidence specialist Kalapa attended the autopsy. The woman was a 5'3" tall black woman of average size. She had no identification on her person. Kalapa collected the personal items found on the body: beige pants, black underwear, a purplish blouse, a white bra, 2 gold chains, and gold earrings. He noted that under her blouse, her bra was pushed down below her breasts. Dr. Odom observed significant hemorrhage bilaterally into the strap muscles of the neck, a fracture of the larynx, and a broken hyoid bone. As you can guess, he determined that the cause of death was asphyxia due to manual strangulation, and the manner of death was homicide. The victim had also been beaten with 2 black eyes, a cut on her nose, and she'd bitten through her bottom lip as she was being strangled. Dr. Odom also observed contusions on the left anterior chest wall, measuring 2 by 2 centimeters, probably from being punched. Her tox screen would later come back negative for alcohol or drugs. Dr. Odom searched for signs of sexual assault. He noted no vaginal or external genital trauma, but vaginal swabs showed the presence of semen containing sperm. The medical examiner collected some samples which he provided to evidence specialist Kalapa, including head hair samples, pubic hair samples, and nail scrapings. 10 fingernail scraping sticks in glass vials were provided to criminalist Milton Hong, who tested each for the presence of blood, as was standard operating procedure at the time. This from the report, quote, "Consistent with the practice in 1982, Mr. Hong discarded the 10 swab sticks after he documented the results of his testing," end quote. Just kill me. Detective Lee perused missing persons reports to see if any of them matched the description of the woman they'd recovered, and he hit pay dirt very quickly. He found a missing persons report that had come in that very day. A woman named Kathy Hicks had been reported missing by her coworkers. She was a reservations agent for Delta Airlines who lived in Georgia. She was visiting Honolulu for a United Airlines-sponsored airline employees softball tournament. She was a booster for the Delta team. Her coworkers had reported her missing after she failed to return to their hotel on the morning of September 19th. Detectives proceeded apace to the hotel, the Ilokai, at 1777 Ala Moana Boulevard. The contact person on the missing persons report was Delta Airlines employee Laverta Bynes, who had been staying with Kathy Hicks in room 2442. But Laverta had already flown out. Luckily, another Delta employee who was at the hotel knew Kathy Hicks and was aware that Laverta had filed a missing persons report on her. This woman's name was Jacqueline Allen. She agreed to assist with the identification, and at 4:25 p.m. on the 19th, she was taken to the morgue, where she viewed the body and identified the woman on the table as Kathy Warnett Hicks of 2851 Bob White Drive in Atlanta. But Jackie had no idea where Kathy had been the night before or with whom. Detective Yu accessed and searched Kathy Hicks's hotel room. While looking through her things, he found the name and telephone number of someone named Stephen T., who lived in Oahu. Another telephone number in her purse led to her cousin, Robert Barber, who also lived in Oahu. Detective Yu interviewed this cousin, Robert Barber, that same day. He was a first lieutenant in the Army stationed at Schofield Barracks in Honolulu. He'd been there for about 2 years. He and Kathy were first cousins. Robert said Kathy had arrived on the island on September 14th. Around 5 o'clock that day, he picked her up from her hotel so she could spend the night with him and his wife. She stayed overnight, and he dropped her back off at the hotel on September 15th. And this part was important. They made plans for Robert to pick her up again on September 17th. But on the 17th, Kathy called him and told him that instead she was going to get a ride from a friend and that she might stop by the barracks located in Wahioa. But she didn't show up, and he didn't hear from her again until the next morning, Saturday, September 18th, when he saw her in person at the softball tournament at Kapiolani Park in Waikiki. This directly from an affidavit, quote, Kathy apologized to Robert for not calling him and related that she had gone out with some people to a club on a military base that she thought was Schofield but turned out to be Hickam Air Force Base. Kathy further informed him that at some point in the night, a male named Tony had walked her out to the payphone to call Robert. But when Tony informed her that Schofield was some distance from where they were, she didn't make the call. Robert also stated that Kathy told him she was at the club with 2 couples and a girlfriend that was in the Navy. Later that Saturday, Robert's wife spoke to Kathy and made arrangements for her to return to their residence after she checked out of her hotel on September 19th. However, that was the last time they had any contact with her, end quote. So who was this guy, Tony? Well, Detective Yu also located and interviewed Stephen T., whose number was in Kathy's things. They spoke on September 19th. He said he was in the Army stationed at Wheeler Air Force Base in Wahiawa in Honolulu. He first met Kathy on September 17th around midnight. He met her through his friend Ronald W. at the Tiki Club on Hicks Air Force Base. He saw Kathy the next day at the softball game at Kapiolani Park, and this was on the 18th. They'd made plans to go out later that night. However, they spoke on the phone between 11 p.m. and midnight on September 18th, and he bailed on their plans because he said he was too tired. Stephen changed his mind and called her room at about 1:30 a.m. on September 19th, but he was told by her roommate, Laverta, that she wasn't there. She'd gone out. He called again at 6 a.m. and was told she still hadn't returned. Okay, so this is weird. A guy Kathy just met calls her room at 1:30 a.m. I get it, fine. But 6 a.m.? Who wants to get a phone call from a potential date at that hour? I did have to remind myself that these are Army and airline people who notoriously get up at dark 30, as my dad says. Maybe 6 o'clock was normal conversation time, I don't know. So Detective Yu turned to the guy who had introduced Kathy and this Stephen T. at the Tiki Bar, Ronald W. He, too, was interviewed on September 19th. Ronald was employed by the Navy and worked at Hicks Air Force Base in Oahu. He had a cousin from Atlanta who was a close friend of Kathy's and knew that Kathy was visiting Hawaii. So he and his wife Gwendolyn had taken Kathy to the Tiki Club at 9:30 p.m. And there they met his friend Stephen T., and he introduced Stephen to Kathy. Ronald said he never saw Kathy leave the building with anyone to use the phone, but he did remember that she danced with a black man that Ronald didn't know. Like Stephen, he last saw Kathy at the softball game at Kapiolani Park on Saturday, the 18th. He knew that Stephen was supposed to call her that night for a date, but he didn't know if they'd ended up going out. He never heard of anyone named Tony that she may have been referring to, and he didn't recall anyone in the Tiki Club by that name. On September 20th, Detective Yu sat down with Laverta Bynes for an interview. I guess Laverta had flown back to the island after finding out Kathy had been killed. Anyway, she told him she was a reservations agent with Delta Airlines and a good friend of Kathy's. She arrived in Hawaii on September 15th and was staying with Kathy at the Ilokai Hotel. On Saturday night, after the softball game, she and Kathy both attended a banquet at the hotel with a bunch of other airline employees. The banquet went late. Sometime between 11:30 and 12 o'clock is when it wrapped up. Laverta went to her hotel room and spoke to Kathy, who told her she was going downstairs to call someone named Stephen from the hotel lobby phone. Laverta knew that Kathy had met a guy named Stephen at the Tiki Club the night before and given him her phone number. This from the probable cause affidavit, quote, Kathy later returned to her hotel room with a male she introduced as Tony and informed Laverta that she was not going out with Stephen that night because he had fallen asleep. Laverta did not know how Kathy knew Tony, but was under the impression that she had just met him in the lobby of the hotel, end quote. Laverta's recall of her meeting with this guy Tony was crucial to the investigation, since it quickly became apparent that he was the last person known to be with Kathy. While Kathy was getting ready in the bathroom, Laverta and Tony had a conversation. He told her he had lived in Hawaii for 2 years, stationed there with the U.S. Navy. He'd been stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, prior to that time. He hailed from Tuskegee, Alabama, and had spent some time in Georgia. That was pretty much it, but Laverta was able to describe Tony as a black male, 23 to 27 years old, about 5'9" to 6 inches tall, maybe 150 to 160 pounds. He had a narrow face, she said, and was wearing a light blue V-neck t-shirt and dark pants. After Kathy came out of the bathroom, she and Tony left the hotel room around 1 a.m. Laverta assumed that Kathy was sticking around the hotel area because she didn't bring her purse with her, only some money and her room key. Laverta went to bed and didn't see Kathy again, and she flew out the next morning. But she said that Stephen T. called the hotel room 3 times between 11 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. Kathy, meanwhile, never returned. Detective Yu continued his rounds of interviews. On September 20th, he interviewed Catriona Skipper. She was a friend of Kathy's who was also in Hawaii for the softball tournament and was staying at the same hotel. I'm thinking these airline people don't sleep normal hours habitually because of time zone changes and so on, because around 1 or 1:30 a.m. on the 19th, Catriona and another friend, Sheila Miller, left their hotel room on the 24th floor to go down to the lobby nightclub. In the elevator, they ran into Kathy and an unknown male whose name Catriona wasn't sure about but might have been Tommy. They separated in the lobby. Catriona and Sheila went to the nightclub while Kathy and Tommy walked toward the swimming pool area. Catriona didn't see or hear from Kathy after that and didn't know exactly what her and Tommy's plans were. Catriona described Tommy as a black male, 6 foot 1 inch tall, slim, at about 160 pounds, with a light complexion, possibly of mixed race. Detective Yu crossed his T's and dotted his I's by also talking to Sheila, who recalled that Kathy introduced her friend in the elevator as Thomas. They met him with Kathy in the elevator sometime between 12 and 1 a.m. Okay, so they had a black guy named Thomas or Tony who was relatively tall, slim, and light-skinned and had possibly been at the Tiki Bar on the Hickam Air Force Base with Kathy on Friday night and who was the person Kathy had last been seen with on Saturday night, September 18th. How hard could it be to find this guy? Well, apparently pretty hard. On September 21st, Detective Yu contacted the Naval Investigative Service to see if they could help him identify the male named Tony or Tommy, described by Catriona, Sheila, and Laverta. The NCIS conducted a search of the Navy personnel database for persons fitting the biographical and physical description of the man with Kathy. They looked for black males named Tony or Tommy who had previously been stationed in Jacksonville with the Navy. They couldn't find anyone who met those criteria. The detectives worked with the 3 women to develop a detailed sketch of the man they'd seen with Kathy, Tony or Tommy. It showed a nice-looking, young, light-skinned black man with a narrow face and high cheekbones. The sketch was shown around and used by NCIS, but they could not find the real-life subject. A probable cause affidavit for the case says, Detectives Yu and Lee followed up on numerous leads and interviewed several more individuals, but no suspect was identified at the time, and in 1985, the case was deferred pending further developments, end quote. That was it. Kathy's case was put on ice, and there it sat, frozen in time for decades.
When you're in HR, it can feel like nothing is easy. From payroll to PTO, from onboarding to benefits, and everything in between. It's a constant juggle of tasks, systems, and spreadsheets. But your HR software? That's the easy part. Meet Bamboo HR. Trusted by over 34,000 companies, it handles all your HR tasks, payroll, benefits, and time tracking, so your team and your company can grow as fast as, well, Bamboo. And Bamboo HR software is actually easy to use. One simple system that pulls all your people data together in one place, so you can ditch scattered systems and wasted hours on tasks that should only take minutes. Because when HR is easier, you can focus on what matters most, your people. HR is hard. Bamboo HR is easy. Ready to simplify all your HR tasks? For a limited time, get a $100 Visa gift card when you complete a free demo at bamboohr.com/gift card. Again, that's bamboohr.com/gift card. Terms and conditions apply.
For period protection you can put on and forget about, nothing beats Knix leak-proof underwear. North America's #1 leak-proof underwear brand. Let's face it, life can be unpredictable, but your leak-proof underwear shouldn't be. That's why millions of people choose Knix. For periods, for light leaks, for everyday freshness. Knix undies are super comfy, super absorbent, and made to handle whatever your day throws at you. Day 2 of your period? Covered. Your daily run? No problem. That big sneeze? You know the one. Yep, we've got you. And with styles like bikinis, boy shorts, thongs, and high-rise, plus sizes from extra small to 4XL, Knix makes it easy to find your perfect fit. Say goodbye to stress and leaks and say hello to undies that work just as hard as you do, no matter the leak. Find the style and level of protection you want at Knix.com and use code FLOW15 for 15% off. That's KNIX.com, code FLOW15 for 15% off. Knix, for your leaks, for your life.
So you want to start a business? You might think you need a team of people and fancy tech skills, but listen to me when I say you don't. You just need GoDaddy Aero. I'm Walton Goggins, an actor, and I like the sound of starting my own business, Walton Goggins Goggle Glasses. But I couldn't do this on my own. GoDaddy Aero uses AI to create everything you need to grow a business. It'll make you a unique logo. It'll create a custom website. It'll write social posts for you and even set you up with a social media calendar. How cool is that? Well, listen to this. For a limited time, you can get Aero All Access for just $1 a week for 12 weeks. We're talking all the AI power of GoDaddy Aero plus a domain, e-commerce store, payments, professional email, a unified inbox, all for less money than I spend on deep tanning lotion while sunbathing off the Amalfi Coast. You know what that sounds like? A plan. Get started at GoDaddy.com. Terms apply.
In 2017, Detective James Slater was on the case. On September 13th of that year, he requested that the Honolulu PD's Scientific Identification Section Forensic Biology Unit process several of the items recovered from Kathy's body, including the black underwear she was wearing when her body was discovered. I can't imagine why this took 3 years, but on January 10th of 2020, Honolulu PD criminalist Shirley Young contacted Detective Michael Ogawa, who had picked up the case in January 2020, and told him she had obtained a partial DNA profile of an unknown male from the sperm fraction of a sample taken from Kathy's underwear. Criminalist Young informed Detective Ogawa that now that she had a profile which had a sufficient number of markers to satisfy the CODIS entry requirements, she would ensure that the profile was entered into the Hawaii State DNA Index System and the National DNA Index System. She uploaded the profile to the databases on January 9th, 2020. As you can guess, there was a hit within 24 hours. On January 14th, Detective Ogawa received a phone call from Detective Jennifer Spears of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office in Florida. Spears had basically freaked out when the CODIS hit came across her desk. She'd been chasing this guy for nearly a decade on Pam's murder, and now he was linked to another one. And even more serendipitous, the victim's last name, Hicks, is Detective Spears' maiden name. She called right over to Hawaii and informed the homicide unit there that she learned that arrestee DNA submitted by her to the CODIS system in connection with the Florida case she was investigating was a preliminary match to the profile the Honolulu authorities had uploaded. His name was Thomas Lewis Garner. He was a black male, 5 feet 11 inches tall, 155 pounds. And he was in custody at the John E. Polk Correctional Facility in Sanford, Florida, awaiting trial for murder. So Detective Ogawa wanted to place this man, Thomas Garner, in Hawaii in September 1982 when Kathy Hicks was slain. He was able to locate a motor vehicle accident report dated October 25, 1981, filed by HPD Officer Andrew Okada. One of the drivers in the accident was a Thomas L. Garner. The accident took place on the island of Oahu. This showed that Thomas Garner was in Hawaii and had access to a vehicle 11 months before Kathy's murder. In fact, the investigators were able to learn that he owned a car while he was stationed on the island. And naval records were even more helpful. They reflected that Thomas Garner had been stationed on Oahu in September 1982, and he'd been shipped out 5 weeks later. NCIS had not been able to find him back in 1982 when they searched their personnel listing for a black male assigned to Hawaii whose last duty station was in Jacksonville, Florida, because, although Thomas Garner did enlist while living in Jacksonville, he was never officially assigned to a duty station there prior to his assignment in Hawaii. So one of the major search criteria the NCIS had been using to narrow down their search had led them astray. Detective Ogawa was anxious to find some evidence connecting Garner to Kathy, besides the CODIS hit and the fact that he was in the area. While a DNA connection is the first step, if the subject has no nexus to the victim, it's harder to make a case for his guilt based on similar STR markers alone. Detective Ogawa had managed to put Garner in Hawaii, obviously, with the accident report and his service record of being stationed there. But he wanted to prove that Garner was the same Tommy that had been seen with Kathy on the night she was killed. So he obtained a photo of Thomas Garner taken in early 1990 from his ex-wife. He then prepared a sequential photo lineup containing that photo using 5 other photographs of randomly selected black males that were similar in age, coloring, and so on. Then they tracked down Sheila Miller, who was now living in Atlanta, Georgia. On February 12th, Officer Helen Weathers of the South Fulton Police Department met with Sheila at her home and presented her with the photo lineup. Sheila was not able to positively identify anyone in the lineup as the male she saw with Kathy at the hotel on September 19, 1982. She said 3 of them were possible, and one of those was Thomas. I have to say here that Sheila spent maybe 45 seconds in an elevator with Thomas Garner nearly 40 years earlier. I'm shocked that she was even able to give his photo a maybe. The next day, February 12th, Officer Weathers met with Laverta Bynes and showed her the photo lineup. She, too, was unable to positively identify anyone as the man supposedly named Tony, whom Kathy had brought to the hotel room. Meanwhile, on January 23, 2020, the FDLE issued a hit letter between the Hawaii DNA profile and Garner's arrestee sample. This would give the investigators probable cause to obtain a direct sample to confirm the CODIS hit. In April 2021, Detective Ogawa applied for a search warrant for a buccal swab to obtain the DNA profile of Thomas Garner to compare to the DNA found on Kathy Hicks' underwear. The search warrant was granted on April 19th. Detective Ogawa forwarded the search warrant from Hawaii to Detective Spears, who applied for a search warrant in Seminole County based on the Hawaii warrant. It was approved on April 21st and executed that same day. Garner's buccal swab to determine whether he had possibly killed Kathy was collected from him at the Polk County Correctional Facility, where he was still awaiting trial for killing Pam. On May 12th, Honolulu PD Detective Kay Mead took custody of the buccal swabs from the SCSO and transported them back to Hawaii, where he entered them into evidence. DNA analyst Shirley Young compared the samples and concluded that Thomas Garner could not be excluded as the source of the DNA found in the interior back crotch of Kathy's underwear. It was the best they were going to be able to do. On June 9th, the Honolulu PD sent a vaginal sperm sample glass slide taken at Kathy's autopsy to Bodie Technology in Virginia. Lindsay Sanney, a DNA analyst there, found no usable DNA on the slide sample. Note that there's no mention of Kathy's actual vaginal swabs. We don't know what happened to those. It appears they were long gone. They were going to have to charge Garner based on the underwear alone. A Honolulu grand jury issued an indictment against Thomas Garner for second-degree murder. A bench warrant was issued for him that day, June 18, 2021. By that point, he was 43 days into his life sentence in Florida. Garner was extradited to Hawaii on December 10, 2021, and arrested.
When you're in HR, it can feel like nothing is easy. From payroll to PTO, from onboarding to benefits, and everything in between. It's a constant juggle of tasks, systems, and spreadsheets. But your HR software? That's the easy part. Meet Bamboo HR. Trusted by over 34,000 companies, it handles all your HR tasks, payroll, benefits, and time tracking, so your team and your company can grow as fast as, well, Bamboo. And Bamboo HR software is actually easy to use. One simple system that pulls all your people data together in one place, so you can ditch scattered systems and wasted hours on tasks that should only take minutes. Because when HR is easier, you can focus on what matters most, your people. HR is hard. Bamboo HR is easy. Ready to simplify all your HR tasks? For a limited time, get a $100 Visa gift card when you complete a free demo at bamboohr.com/gift card. Again, that's bamboohr.com/gift card. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's be honest. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with wired bras. We love the lift, but hate the digging. We love the support, but hate feeling trapped. Well, Hicks just changed everything with FreeFlex, a wired bra actually designed to work with your body, not against it. FreeFlex features a revolutionary, flexible wire that moves when you move, bends when you bend, and keeps everything exactly where you want it. No poking, no stabbing, no constant readjusting, just freedom to move. It also has a demi-cup shape for a natural lift with a lower neckline that flatters in everything from V-necks to dresses. And because it's from Hicks, it's available in sizes for every body. Experience the first wired bra you'll actually want to wear all day. Visit Hicks.com for 15% off your order with FreeFlex15. That's KNIX.com, code FreeFlex15 for 15% off. Knix.com.
So you want to start a business? You might think you need a team of people and fancy tech skills, but listen to me when I say you don't. You just need GoDaddy Aero. I'm Walton Goggins, an actor, and I like the sound of starting my own business, Walton Goggins Goggle Glasses. But I couldn't do this on my own. GoDaddy Aero uses AI to create everything you need to grow a business. It'll make you a unique logo. It'll create a custom website. It'll write social posts for you and even set you up with a social media calendar. How cool is that? Well, listen to this. For a limited time, you can get Aero All Access for just $1 a week for 12 weeks. We're talking all the AI power of GoDaddy Aero plus a domain, e-commerce store, payments, professional email, a unified inbox, all for less money than I spend on deep tanning lotion while sunbathing off the Amalfi Coast. You know what that sounds like? A plan. Get started at GoDaddy.com. Terms apply.
Okay, let's get into the pretrial stuff in Hawaii. I was a little bit surprised that Garner pleaded not guilty and fought the charges, given that he was already serving a life sentence in Florida. If he was convicted of second-degree murder in Hawaii, he would face mandatory life in prison there. But Garner rolled the dice on a trial. On January 9, 2023, Garner's appointed defense attorney filed a motion to convince Judge Rowena Somerville to suppress the DNA evidence against Garner. He alleged that Garner's DNA was obtained as a result of an allegedly illegal search and seizure of his trash in the state of Florida. The defense brief argued that the warrantless search of his trash on February 8, 2019 in Jacksonville violated his reasonable expectation of privacy under Hawaii law. This was because in Hawaii, garbage placed in closed, opaque trash bags is still deemed to carry an expectation of privacy. The defense tried to argue that the trash pull in Florida violated Hawaii law, so it and every bit of evidence resulting from it must be excluded. Needless to say, the state's position was that what the police do legally in Florida has no bearing on Garner's rights in Hawaii. The court denied the motion. Nice try. Next, the defense moved to exclude any mention of Garner's conviction in Florida for the murder of Pam Cahanes. The state had filed a notice of intent to use evidence, hoping to inform the jury about Garner's commission of a similar crime just 2 years later. Under the rules of evidence, the prior conviction would be disallowed as inadmissible character evidence, but potentially allowed to show similarity in M.O. So the state filed an appendix to state's notice of intent, noting a number of similarities between the Cahanes and Hicks cases, such as the time of day the decedents were discovered, the presence of insect bites on the bodies, the victims' ages and weights and heights, and the cause of death being strangulation. Well, the defense came out swinging, arguing in its April 28, 2023 motion in limine No. 1 that Garner's conviction in the Cahanes case was irrelevant and must be excluded, because the state had failed to show that the murders were sufficiently similar. The women were different races, and their bodies were not positioned the same or dressed the same when they were found. Pam's and Kathy's injuries were not the same either. Kathy had 2 black eyes while Pam didn't. Pam had bruises to her forehead, petechiae, and contusions on her neck, while Kathy didn't. Pam died by, quote, cerebral anoxia due to compression of neck muscles and external pressure by unknown object, while Kathy's medical examiner opined that she died by manual strangulation. The defense argued that introduction of the Cahanes case would suggest to the jury that the defendant, Garner, had a propensity to murder strangers he had sex with, an impermissible inference under the Hawaii rules of evidence. In the motion in limine, the defense made an interesting argument that I think is worth mentioning because it amounts to a bit of an admission, quoted here from a court ruling. Defendant made the following argument in support of his position that his Florida murder conviction must be precluded from evidence in the trial for the above-captioned case. The state does not need the Cahanes case to prove that Mr. Garner killed Kathy Hicks. The presence of Mr. Garner's DNA on Hicks's underwear does not prove that Mr. Garner killed her, but does have a tendency to prove Mr. Garner's presence with Hicks at some point in time, and strongly rebuts any denial that he had sexual relations or contact with her. Aside from the physical evidence, the state also has the recorded statements of multiple witnesses who saw Mr. Garner with Hicks at the Ilokai Hotel on the night of September 18, 1982. The state can meet its burden with only the evidence collected in the Hicks case. Accordingly, this factor weighs in favor against admission of the evidence, end quote. So what this means is Garner was going the route of Yes, I had sex with her, but I didn't kill her. And he was even going so far as to acknowledge that it was he who Sheila, Laverta, and Catriona saw with Kathy that night, which the witnesses were not able to testify to with certainty. The judge held a hearing to permit arguments from both sides on the issue, and in the end, she sided with the defense. Garner's conviction in Florida for murdering Pamela Cahanes was inadmissible in the Hawaii murder trial. At the trial, which commenced on June 30th, 2023, the state's case was prosecuted by Office of the Prosecuting Attorney's seasoned Deputy Prosecutor Scott Bell, and Garner was represented by Deputy Public Defender Edward Aquino. In his 35-minute opening statements, the prosecutor told the jury that Kathy was last seen with the defendant, and she was found the next day wearing the same clothing, punched, strangled, and thrown down a ravine. The DNA of only one man was found on her clothing, and that man was the defendant, Thomas Garner. Garner left the island 5 weeks later and got away with his crime for decades. Defense attorney Edward Aquino spoke for just 8 minutes. He basically said, yes, Garner was with her, yes, they had sex, but he didn't kill her. He put her in a taxi and went to bed. The majority of the state's witnesses were the original first responders, CSI Leighton Kalapa, the medical examiner's investigator, and so on. They all talked about finding Kathy, collecting her clothing on which semen was later found, and so on. One of the joggers who found Kathy, Evelyn H., also testified about that experience. The original detectives Lee and Yu were dead, but Detective Michael Ogawa testified about the Honolulu Police Department's investigation of the homicide case. Dr. Odom testified about his original autopsy report, and Dr. Masahiko Kobayashi was called as an expert in the field of forensic pathology. He testified that Kathy died of strangulation and her hyoid bone was broken. She had 2 black eyes and had bitten through her lip, injuries that were not observed by her roommates or friends back at the hotel when she was last seen alive. Garner's attorneys stipulated to the following 2 witness statements, so their live testimony was not required. A recording of Laverta Bynes' statement was played for the jury. She said that the young black Navy man who was with Kathy was good-looking, physically fit, and his name was either Tommy or Tony. He told her he came from Jacksonville, Florida. A recording of Catriona Skipper's statement was also played for the jury. She said the man she met in the elevator with Kathy was tall, handsome, clean-cut, and his name was Tommy or Tony. Sheila Miller actually testified in person and backed all of this up. Honolulu PD Captain James Slater testified about reopening the investigation and the testing he requested. Shirley Young testified as an expert in the field of serology and forensic DNA testing. She told the jury about finding the unknown male's semen on Kathy's underwear and uploading the profile to CODIS, and then talked about the comparison testing she did of the semen DNA to Garner's DNA standard. Detective Kay Reed testified about obtaining Garner's buccal swabs from Detective Spears in Florida. He said, quote, I flew into Seminole County, Florida to recover buccal swabs. Both were packaged and not tampered with. Gwen Piano, a custodian of Navy records, testified about Garner being assigned to Oahu at the time of Kathy's murder. Seminole County Detective Jennifer Spears was called to testify to the facts and circumstances underlying the Florida investigation and arrest. She wasn't allowed to mention anything about Pam Cahanes, remember. I assume the jury assumed she was there just because she had arrested Garner in Florida, where he was living, pursuant to the arrest warrant issued by Hawaii. Detective Spears told the jury about being contacted by Detective Ogawa and asked to collect Garner's DNA. She did so and submitted it to Detective Meade, and it was not tampered or compromised in any way. All of these witnesses were cross-examined by the defense. In her statement, Laverta Bynes had said that Stephen T., the man who Kathy had been supposed to meet up with that night, called her hotel room 3 times between 1 and 7:30 a.m. looking for her. Deputy Public Defender Aquino pointed out that Kathy was supposed to meet up with Stephen and asked the jury why this man would call the hotel room repeatedly. He was implying that Stephen was desperate to get to Kathy. But as Prosecutor Bell countered, if he was with Kathy, why would he keep calling the hotel room? Aquino pointed out that Kathy had no trauma to her vaginal area. The implication was that she had had consensual sex with Garner, and then she met up with Stephen T., who killed her. Of course, The prosecutor pointed out on rebuttal that Stephen had cooperated with the investigation and been ruled out because there was zero evidence that he had ever met up with Kathy, and his DNA was found nowhere on her. The state rested its case on July 6th after all these witnesses had testified. Then the defense filed a motion for judgment of acquittal, arguing that the state's case, based on both direct and circumstantial evidence, was insufficient to support a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That motion was denied. Then the defense called its only witness, Thomas Lewis Garner. He took the stand on Thursday, July 6th. He testified that he was based in Oahu as a dental technician for the Navy in September 1982. He was due to be transferred out in a few weeks. He told the jury that on the night of Saturday, September 18th, he was in the club at the lobby of the Ilokai Hotel in Waikiki. The lounge was a place he'd been going for 2.5 years to listen to music. That night, he met Kathy there when she approached him. He thought she was beautiful and said she was the first single black woman he had met there. He didn't recall her name, he said on the stand, but, quote, I felt like we had a really good conversation going, and I thought we were kind of really starting to like each other, end quote. He said the two bonded over their shared southern U.S. heritage. He was from Alabama and she from Georgia. He said, quote, and I thought maybe we would have sex or something. Kathy invited him up to her hotel room, he said, and there he met her roommate, Laverta. She was getting ready for bed because she had an early flight. So he and Kathy hung out on the balcony and then decided to go to the pool. They took the elevator down, meeting some women Kathy knew on the way. He said they then went to his hotel room at the nearby Pink Palace. He admitted that he had hoped for a hookup that night, and so he'd taken a shuttle bus from the base and gotten a hotel room for the evening. Aquino, his attorney, asked him, what happened when you got into the hotel room? Garner, well, we had sex. Aquino, when you had sex with Kathy Hicks, was there anything unusual? Garner, no. Aquino, was there any argument? Garner, no. Aquino, was there any disagreement about what was happening? Garner, no. Garner continued to tell the jury his version of what happened that night. After spending about half an hour in his room having sex, they cleaned up and debated what to do. They decided to go dancing. They went to a club and danced until about 2:30 a.m. Then Kathy said she had to go because she was flying out the next day. He got her a cab and paid the driver to take her to her hotel. They didn't exchange numbers or make any promises to see each other again. It was simply a one-time thing, and they both knew it. Garner said, quote, basically, we just enjoyed the moment we had and said goodbye, good luck, whatever. It was just one of those things that we didn't think about doing. We just had that moment where we just partied and had fun, and that was it. No expectations. Aquino asked, did you kill Kathy Hicks? Garner, no. On cross-examination, Scott Bell got Garner to admit that when he hooked up with Kathy, he was aware that his time in Hawaii was limited, and he was scheduled to be shipped out in a few weeks. The implication was that he had gambled on his impending transfer, preventing him from being found out for killing Kathy. Bell also asked Garner about whether he had a car, and Garner said yes, but it was in the shop at the time, which is why he had to take the shuttle bus. How convenient. Prosecutor Bell laid out the state's case against Garner in his closing argument. He was the last person to see her alive, as several witnesses saw her leaving with him, and he admitted that he was the man seen with her. His nickname was Tommy. He was in the military, and he hailed from Alabama by way of Jacksonville, just as he had told Laverta. Speaking of Laverta, she had said in her statement that Kathy wouldn't have just gone off for the evening without letting her know, as she knew Laverta would worry. Further, said Scott Bell, quote, she was last seen with the defendant in the same clothes that she was found on the side of the road, with injuries absent from when her friends last saw her. Bell also told the jury that Garner had admitted to driving through the area where Kathy was found, as he sometimes went to Waikiki from Oahu on the weekends. The body was found on Nuanu Pali Drive, which runs parallel to Highway 61, Bell said. And finally, the crux of the case. Garner's DNA was the only male DNA found on Kathy's underwear or anywhere on her, no one else's. Bell drove home the brutal nature of the crime, saying that Garner, quote, ferociously assaulted and then manually strangled her to death. Her name was not important to him. He had already gotten what he was looking for. When it was his turn for closing arguments, Deputy Public Defender Aquino raised various questions about why Kathy didn't have any injuries to her vaginal area, where she had been killed, and how she had been transported to the place where she was found, since Garner didn't have a car because his was in the shop. He pointed out that a drop of semen on Kathy's underwear did not equate to murder, far from it. His client had admitted to being with the victim, but there was zero evidence that he had harmed her. Bell rebutted, quote, "Mere speculation or guesswork is not reasonable doubt. The prosecution does bear the burden of proof, but the prosecution is only required to prove what is required by law." In other words, they didn't have to answer every unanswered question, such as motive or how Kathy got to where she was found. All they had to do was connect the murder to the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury of 8 men and 4 women got the case on Friday morning, July 7th. At 2:30 p.m., they sent a communication to the judge saying, "We're having a hard time coming into a decision. Are there any other choices that we could make other than guilty or not guilty? And is there a time frame?" The judge basically said, "No, get back to it." The jury deliberated until 4 o'clock, and then they asked for a break and were dismissed for the weekend. They reconvened on Monday, July 10th. And finally, on Tuesday the 11th, they announced they had reached a unanimous verdict. Foreperson Eugene Kalani handed the verdict form to the bailiff. The judge reviewed it and handed it to the clerk to read aloud. Not guilty. Judge Somerville accepted the jury's verdict and announced that Thomas Garner would be released from custody of the state of Hawaii and returned to Florida to continue serving his sentence in the Cahanes murder. Garner's attorney, Edward Aquino, gave an interview afterwards, saying the state just didn't have enough evidence against his client. "Anyone can leave their DNA, doesn't mean he killed her," he said. Quote, "At this point, we're just grateful for the jury's patience in taking the time in deliberating this case. Based on the facts that have been presented, we're grateful for that. We believe a just verdict has been achieved in this case." As for the prosecutor, Scott Bell, I was told that he was crushed and angered by the defeat and the letting down of Kathy's family. His office was not permitted to poll the jury. Both Prosecutor Bell and DPD Aquino declined to speak with me about the outcome of this case. Kathy's family was shocked to their core. Several members of her family had taken time to attend the trial of Thomas Garner in Florida, the man they believed had also killed their beloved Kathy. Then they had traveled all the way to Hawaii to attend Kathy's trial, and I believe it's a fair statement to say that they expected justice to be served. When it wasn't, it was an incredibly shocking and devastating outcome. Several news outlets in Hawaii, including Hawaii News Now and the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, interviewed Kathy's younger brother, Braylon Hicks. Braylon was now 55 years old and a captain at a police department in his and Kathy's home state of Georgia. He told the Star-Advertiser that he was just 15 when he answered the phone at his parents' house, and a Honolulu police detective mistook him for his father and told him that his daughter's body had been found. For decades, his sister's murder remained cold, and now, to have a name and then to have him set free was devastating. Braylon said to Hawaii News Now, quote, "He dropped her off at a certain time and she just happened to end up murdered only a few hours later. I just hope they," meaning the jury, "research the case and find out that this man killed my sister in the exact same manner in which he killed Pamela Cahanes in 1984. But Braylon said the fact that Garner was serving life for Pam's murder didn't soften the blow. It, quote, "doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, for me, he's set free as far as what he did to my sister. He killed my sister the same exact way that he killed the woman in Florida." Braylon said aloud what many of us were thinking. The NCIS and Honolulu investigators dropped the ball all those years ago. They had accurate and specific information about Kathy's last known companion, including a sketch, his hometown, and a first name, yet they failed to find him. If they had, they would have been much more likely to find evidence connecting Garner to her murder back then. For example, Braylon pointed out that modern investigators had no way of proving whether Garner's car was in the shop or not in September 1982. He had told the jury his car was in the shop and he didn't have the funds to get it repaired. Investigators back in the day would have been able to vet that claim. Instead, Braylon lamented, the jury, quote, "took his word for it like it was the God's honest truth." This next bit is all from Hawaii's KHON2. The Hicks family flew to Honolulu from Georgia for the trial and went to the same spots Kathy was last seen and where she was found. Quote, "It was very surreal. My wife and I took pictures. Jennifer Spears, the woman that brought him to justice the first time, she took pictures with us at the scene. We brought flowers and laid them at the spot, and it was very surreal. It was almost to the point where I wanted to lay down and feel my sister one more time, said Kathy Hicks' younger brother, Braylon Hicks. Kathy's cousin, Dion Richardson, also came to Hawaii for the trial. She and another of Kathy's cousins, San Ireland, drove out to the scene where Kathy's body had been found. They looked down the ravine where she'd been tossed, and Dion said, quote, "I prayed she was dead before that." Braylon Hicks told KHON2 he'd never forget the phone call from Hawaii telling him Kathy was dead. Quote, "She was my best friend. Kathy was my best friend. She protected me." Braylon also told the news channel that he was frustrated that his sister's case had gone cold for so many years, and he decided to go into law enforcement himself. Quote, "I was very disappointed in the verdict," he said. "It was too many things that were too close that it could have been reasonable, very reasonable, that he did do it. And it would have been more unreasonable that somebody took her during that small amount of time that they say and murdered her. So I don't see how they came to the verdict. But was it possible someone else did it? Yes, but was it probable? No, not at all. He was the last one with her. The jurors, I understand they might not have known. They cost our family, my mother and father, who are 89 and 87 years old, that closure they could have gotten, and it was a very sad situation," Braylon added. From KHON2, quote, "We asked Braylon if knowing Garner will serve a life sentence for Cahanes' murder gives him any relief or closure. It doesn't mean anything, not one thing. I'm glad he won't harm or hurt anyone else. I called my mom and told her the verdict, and she has the same spirits she had back then. And my mom prayed for his salvation. You know, she's a forgiving lady, and she has good spirits and tells me not to be down. But again, Kathy was my best friend. She was my best friend, and I got that phone call, and it stays ringing in my ear. And just to see the jurors who wouldn't look me in the eye after saying he was innocent. And now I'm sure they're reading and knowing he killed my sister in the same exact manner he beaten and raped and strangled and even dumped down a hill the same way he left Pamela Jane Cahanes."
When you're in HR, it can feel like nothing is easy. From payroll to PTO, from onboarding to benefits, and everything in between. It's a constant juggle of tasks, systems, and spreadsheets. But your HR software? That's the easy part. Meet Bamboo HR. Trusted by over 34,000 companies, it handles all your HR tasks, payroll, benefits, and time tracking, so your team and your company can grow as fast as, well, Bamboo. And Bamboo HR software is actually easy to use. One simple system that pulls all your people data together in one place, so you can ditch scattered systems and wasted hours on tasks that should only take minutes. Because when HR is easier, you can focus on what matters most, your people. HR is hard. Bamboo HR is easy. Ready to simplify all your HR tasks? For a limited time, get a $100 Visa gift card when you complete a free demo at bamboohr.com/gift card. Again, that's bamboohr.com/gift card. Terms and conditions apply.
For period protection you can put on and forget about, nothing beats Knix leak-proof underwear. North America's #1 leak-proof underwear brand. Let's face it, life can be unpredictable, but your leak-proof underwear shouldn't be. That's why millions of people choose Knix. For periods, for light leaks, for everyday freshness. Knix undies are super comfy, super absorbent, and made to handle whatever your day throws at you. Day 2 of your period? Covered. Your daily run? No problem. That big sneeze? You know the one. Yep, we've got you. And with styles like bikinis, boy shorts, thongs, and high-rise, plus sizes from extra small to 4XL, Knix makes it easy to find your perfect fit. Say goodbye to stress and leaks, and say hello to undies that work just as hard as you do, no matter the leak. Find the style and level of protection you want at Knix.com and use code FLOW15 for 15% off. That's KNIX.com, code FLOW15 for 15% off. Knix, for your leaks, for your life.
So you want to start a business? You might think you need a team of people and fancy tech skills, but listen to me when I say you don't. You just need GoDaddy Aero. I'm Walton Goggins, an actor, and I like the sound of starting my own business, Walton Goggins Goggle Glasses. But I couldn't do this on my own. GoDaddy Aero uses AI to create everything you need to grow a business. It'll make you a unique logo. It'll create a custom website. It'll write social posts for you and even set you up with a social media calendar. How cool is that? Well, listen to this. For a limited time, you can get Aero All Access for just $1 a week for 12 weeks. We're talking all the AI power of GoDaddy Aero plus a domain, e-commerce store, payments, professional email, a unified inbox, all for less money than I spend on deep tanning lotion while sunbathing off the Amalfi Coast. You know what that sounds like? A plan. Get started at GoDaddy.com. Terms apply.
Kathy Hicks' mother, Joan Hicks, who was 87 years old, said in a written statement intended to be read to Garner at his sentencing, quote, "In one shameful act you took from us our daughter, big sister, cousin, friend, and co-worker. She was an encourager to many. When you killed her, you killed a part of each of us. I've seen the toll Kathy's death has taken on my husband, Bofus Hicks, age 90. Since hearing of your apprehension, he has continued to physically and emotionally diminish. Both of us are seniors now, unable to travel the distance to Hawaii to witness your trial. But we are thankful to know justice is finally being served. While you've had over 35 years to enjoy life and walk free, Kathy did not have that privilege. Kathy had a life filled with so much promise. You managed to snuff that out with your selfish, barbaric actions. Today doesn't bring closure, it brings justice. We're hopeful you'll never see another day of freedom. May God have mercy on your soul." Well, Joan didn't get to read her victim's impact statement at the sentencing because there was no sentencing. How tragic that her statement presumed that Garner would be convicted. We've seen juries in DNA cases convict without sketches that resemble the defendant and without witnesses recalling the victim's last being seen in the company of the accused. Several other family members of Kathy Hicks shared their memories of her with the Star Advertiser. Her cousin, San Ireland, was just 2 months apart from Kathy in age, and the two grew up together and were very close. She was also an employee of Delta Airlines and working as a flight attendant. Kathy had invited her to go along on the trip to Hawaii, but she couldn't. She said, quote, "I wondered if I'd gone with her whether I could have deterred her from going off with him." San explained that Kathy loved writing and had majored in English and journalism at Georgia State University. After she was killed, they found some of her poems among her things. They also received a couple of postcards from Kathy after she was already dead. She had mailed them all the way from Hawaii prior to her death, and because the mail took so long, they arrived after that horrible phone call to Braylon. Okay, so what else is there to say about Thomas Lewis Garner? He was born on January 16, 1960 in Glenwood, Alabama, and grew up in Tuskegee. He had 2 sisters and 1 brother, the one I'm calling Wally. The family moved to Jacksonville in 1975 when he was 15. His father was an air traffic controller at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station. Garner graduated from Jacksonville-Ribault Senior High School and enlisted in the U.S. Navy Reserve in that city on July 12, 1979 at age 19. He attended boot camp in San Diego and then was stationed in Hawaii from April 22, 1980 to October 29, 1982. In the Navy, he trained as a dental technician. In Orlando, he lived outside the base and worked at a Cumberland Farms convenience store as a second job. After leaving the Navy in 1985, he moved to Jacksonville to live with his mother for a time. His father died in 1995. Garner moved to Georgia and worked in Atlanta for about 3 years. When he was arrested, he was working as a dental hygienist at the state of Florida prison, working for a private company that contracted dental care to the state for the prisoners. So he was already comfortable in prison. Little did he know that he would soon become a permanent resident. As we heard from the women in his life, Garner was an abuser who subjected his partners to substantial domestic violence. We know he killed Pam. A jury found him guilty. And I, for one, believe he also killed Kathy Hicks. Detective Spears agrees. She told me that the slayings of Kathy and Pam both occurred when Garner was under stress in his personal life. His triggers were when things went wrong in his relationships. As for how he crossed paths with his 2 known homicide victims, I believe that Garner met Kathy on Friday night at the Tiki Club on Hickam Air Force Base in Waikiki, when she went there with her cousin's friend Ronald and his wife. Remember that she told her own cousin, Robert, that she'd been walked out to the payphone by a guy named Tony. Robert probably just got the name wrong. I believe Garner took a shine to Kathy. She told him where she was staying, and he deliberately went to the club in her hotel the next night, hoping to engineer running into her. He did, and she had been stood up by her date, Stephen T., and the rest is history. Pam's case is a little more confusing. I have to say I'm sort of dissatisfied that we're unable to reconcile all we know about the crime scene with the most likely theory about how Pam and Garner crossed paths. Remember that Pam was found with her shopping bags filled with purchases and personal items scattered around her. Detective Spears firmly believes she never made it back to the base on Saturday evening after shopping. And even if she did, she certainly never made it to the Mariners Club. Those witnesses who thought they saw her there almost certainly conflated Friday and Saturday nights. Same with Jamie B., who was convinced he gave Pam a ride on his motorcycle on Saturday night. But there's no way Pam brought all those bags, Sears, Kmart, and so on, full of stuff to the club or on a motorcycle. Detective Spears told me her theory, and to me it makes a world of sense. Pam was at the Mariners Club on Friday night after graduation. She stayed out until 2:30 and was seen dancing with lots of men. Thomas Garner also liked to hang out at the Mariners Club. They met there and maybe hit it off. Or they could have originally met when Pam had her initial dental appointment when she first started going to boot camp in May. In any event, it's possible that Garner was the man Pam was referring to on Saturday morning when she told her friend Kim that she had a date that night with a guy who was in the dental program. But she never made it that far. Detective Spears believes that Pam was headed back to the base after her shopping excursion and she'd taken the bus. It was hot, August in Florida. And Gardner had told her that he worked at the Cumberland Farms convenience store right outside the base. It was walking distance. Could Pam have stopped in to get a cold drink and say hello? If she did Garner offer her a ride back to the barracks with all her bags in a nice air-conditioned car? If he had, she likely didn't think twice about accepting. He was a nice guy, a dental technician, and a Navy man. Why not? Pam ended up dead in the weedy lawn of a vacant house in Sanford the next morning. Garner dumped her and all her stuff out of his car at the deserted house. As he drove away, he found her bra in his car. He quickly chucked it out the window. As for the pill bottle found in the cup of the bra, no one has a clue how or whether that plays into things. As I said, there are a few facets of the crime scene that we just can't fully explain. Did Garner invite Pam to go somewhere? Maybe they made a plan to go somewhere other than back to the base. We have no idea where they went, but Garner's sister lived in Longwood, which was a couple of miles from where Pam was dumped. It's possible that Garner offered up her place as somewhere they could go for some private time. His sister was also in the military. Maybe she was away on orders. We'll never know. Did Garner and Pam go get some late-night food? The receipt, time-stamped 1:09 a.m. on August 5th, was unlabeled and not itemized. Did they pick up some food at that late hour or something else? We have no idea. But perhaps the Chinese food carton was a red herring, just trash thrown out of Garner's car, and the receipt was unrelated. Why was Pam's uniform pant leg rolled up? This is the question I wrestle with. We know she was on Jamie B.'s motorcycle the night before, but she wouldn't have walked around all day with her pant leg rolled up. And she didn't roll it up just because it was hot outside, because she would have rolled both of them up. Speaking of it being hot, to Detective Spears, it appears possible that at some point, Pam was wearing the yellow shorts found with her things. They had grass stains on them. Could she even have been wearing those when things with Garner went down? Maybe he had attacked her in his car and she ran. Maybe he chased her into the side yard of the vacant house and stripped her, raped her, and strangled her there, and then dumped all of her things out of his car near her. We don't know. Another thing, whitish fluid was observed in Pam's vaginal area during her autopsy, but tests were never able to determine that it was semen. The only semen detected was a drop on her underwear, exactly the same as in the Kathy Hicks case. It's incredibly unfortunate that Kathy Hicks' vaginal swabs and fingernail scrapings were discarded. Those might have made a difference in her case. As it is, while I have to say the DNA ID side of me is outraged that Garner was acquitted in Kathy's case, we all know he did it, the lawyer side of me begrudgingly recognizes that absent the information about what Garner did to Pam Cahanes, the existent evidence of Garner's guilt in Kathy's case, at least in the eyes of the law, is arguably not sufficient for a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Believe me, I really feel for Kathy's family. And so does Detective Spears. She said the hardest part for her was the fact that Kathy's brother Braylon, a career lawman in Georgia who dedicated his life to law enforcement, didn't see justice in his own sister's case. The system failed him, and Garner got away with murder. Kathy's case is still open. But even without justice for Kathy, at least her family has the knowledge that Garner is in prison for a very, very long time. And if they're like me, they get a tiny bit of joy out of the irony of the DNA of Garner, a dental technician, being snagged off a piece of dental floss from his trash. Detective Spears told the Orlando Sentinel of the subjects of ongoing cold case investigations, quote, "I think they know we're coming for them. They better be scared. There's no perfect murder." As for Garner, he didn't commit the perfect murder. He just got extremely lucky in Kathy's case. So lucky that he got cocky and did it again. And Detective Spears tells me she's convinced that Thomas Garner has other victims out there. Kathy and Pam aren't the only ones. After 37 years, Pam Cahanes' case is resolved thanks to forensic genealogy. And if you're one of the bad guys, they're coming for you. Thank you so much to retired Detective Jennifer Spears for speaking with me several times about this case. Recently, I let listeners know about a new benefit available to them called an AbJack Insider subscription that's available through Apple Podcasts. An AbJack Insider subscription will give listeners ad-free access to every bit of DNA ID content published, both past episodes and future episodes. It will also give you benefits like early access and bonus content. Head over to Apple Podcasts and click on the DNA ID show page or the AbJack Entertainment channel to start a free trial. Thanks for listening to this episode of DNA ID. If you'd like to listen to the show ad-free and help support the show in the process, please head over to patreon.com/DNAID. And if you're interested in some fun DNA ID merch, visit the store at customizedgirl.com/s/DNAID podcast. To contact the show, please email us at dnaidpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at DNAID Podcast on Instagram, at DNAID Podcast on Twitter, or on Facebook at facebook.com/DNAID Podcast. Finally, if you want to visit our website, go to DNAIDpodcast.com. You'll be able to get all the episodes of the show, leave comments on episodes that I can respond to, and you can even leave voicemails. You'll get all the latest news about the show and important updates. Find links to our social media, merch, and a lot more. It's really your one-stop shop for everything DNA ID. DNA ID is written, researched, and hosted by me, Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by me and Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Music by Connor Betancourt. Check out our other collaborative podcasts, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, and Beyond Bizarre True Crime.
When the holidays are over, it's time to kick the new year in gear at Kia of Port Charlotte with exceptional offers on all remaining 2023 models, like 0.9% financing on select Kia models or no payments for 3 months. Don't miss out on your chance to kick the new year in gear. Hurry in and save today at Kia of Port Charlotte, where relationships matter, or online at kiaofportcharlotte.com.
Call 1-800-583-6146 for complete details.
With Kroger Delivery, even if you don't live near a Kroger store, you can still get fresh groceries delivered to your door. Kroger's professional drivers guarantee your food is handled with care. And their refrigerated trucks mean that every order gets to you extra fresh. Visit Kroger.com and start your cart. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Enjoy a Boost by Kroger membership for 50% off. Clip your digital coupon and enroll to get fee-free delivery for less than $30 a year. Restrictions apply. See site for details.